Starting off this countdown, we have DENISE Arda. DENISE Arda is a Swedish officer that went missing in Stockholm on November 12, 2020. To this day, no one knows what happened to him or where he is, or even if he's still alive. So on the day, apparently he told his dad he was going on a 50-mile run, but he never returned home. There is CCTV footage of him leaving the gym, but nothing after that. Army and police searched all over for him for 3 months, and still nothing. Theory goes that he was either kidnapped, murdered, took his own life, or ran off for some reason. So basically all the possibilities. But he left behind his phone and IDs, so they honestly don't know what to think. In our 9th spot, we have the imposter. And if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. You know the drill, because it really helps us out. This one is quite eerie. It literally gave me the creeps. So this story was shared by a woman named Sharon over on Reddit. Sharon's daughter went missing back in 2016. She believes that she was kidnapped. Here's the freaky part. One day a policeman showed up at her door asking about the case, saying that he was assigned to help find her daughter. Sharon invited him in and gave him all the information she knew about her daughter's disappearance. The police officer took detailed notes and then investigated the daughter's room, even taking a bag of her personal belongings, saying that it was necessary for the case. Before leaving, he gave Sharon his card and told her to contact him if she gets any more leads. Now here's the messed up part. Sharon went to contact the number on the card and it said the phone was out of service. She then went to the local police station and asked about this new cop assigned to the case. No one at the station knew who this man was. In the end, it was discovered that the police officer that came to Sharon's house was most likely the man responsible for her daughter's kidnapping. He came in to get some of her personal possessions, but also to see if the mom knew if the police had any leads. That is extremely messed up. Moving on at number 8, we have the ghost police officer. So this story happened back in the late 90s, early 2000s. An officer was out responding to a call of a collision, but when he arrived on scene, there was an officer already there before him. An officer he didn't know. He got out of the car and the two officers did their little introductions. The officer at the scene said his name was Officer Red. Yes, Red, R-E-D. And basically said he could handle it and that the other cop should go. So the officer shook his hand and went back to his car and started driving off. That's when he was radioed asking where he was. He was needed at the scene. So he drove back to the scene, but Officer Red was gone. So he went up to the accident victims and started interviewing them. That's when one of the victims asked him who he was talking to earlier. Apparently they saw him arrive, get out of his car, have a conversation by himself, and then drive away. Yeah, so Officer Red is most likely a ghost. In our 7th spot, we have Officer James. Officer James was a Nevada police officer that worked undercover. On June 25th of 1982, he was out on duty when he disappeared without a trace. He was working undercover getting close to drug dealers. But I guess something went wrong along the way, or they figured out that he was a cop. Either way, James never reported back for a number of days, and that's when the police force began to worry. They knew something bad had happened to him. But to this day, they haven't found James. The very few leads that they had turned out to be dead ends. So sadly, James has never been found, / they don't even know what happened to him. Moving on to number 6, we have the 10 officers. This story involves not only one officer going missing, but 10. So back in June of 2020, 10 officers in Mexico were abducted and went missing. The officers were assigned to provide security for a group of Mexican mining businessmen. That's when an armed group of individuals kidnapped 2 men and 10 officers. When the station lost contact with them, they knew something went wrong and were sent to investigate. For a while, there were no signs of the officers anywhere. That was until authorities received a tip about an abandoned vehicle and a strange odor coming from it. 2 of the 3 unmarked police pickup trucks were found at that location. Inside, they found the body parts of 7 of the missing cops. I honestly don't know what happened to the other 2. This article didn't tell me anything about it, so they could still be missing. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the missing policewoman. In 2016, a female officer named Ashwini Bidri went missing. She told her landlord that she was going home for a few days, so he was to let the milkman know that he shouldn't leave any milk out for her. Later that day, she was spotted near FLYNN railway station. That was the last time anyone had seen or heard from her. For 3 months, Ashwini was missing with no solid leads. Those 3 months turned into years. Finally, in 2018, a man was arrested for her disappearance. The man's name was Abhay Karundkar. He was actually the senior inspector that worked with Ashwini. Turns out the two had a thing going on behind the scenes. He apparently took her life, then dumped her body in the creek. Sadly, her body has never been found. Moving on to number 4, we have Inspector V.S. Navas. In 2019, Inspector V.S. Navas went missing after getting in a heated argument. The night before, Navas got in a fight with a senior official. The next day, he was gone without a trace. Now, Navas's wife believes that he fled because of mental torture that he was subjected to at work. He was also repeatedly humiliated at work. It was getting way too much for him, so he left. Now, he was last seen on CCTV footage withdrawing cash from an ATM. His force went out looking for him, but Navas's wife told them to just let him be and have time for himself. In our 3rd spot, we have Stephen BEARE. In 2016, Littleton police officer Stephen BEARE went climbing at Mount Elbrus. It is the tallest mountain in Europe. On June 12th, Stephen called his wife Olivia and said he arrived safely in Russia. That's the last time she ever spoke to him. Stephen went on his climb and was never seen again. Now, Stephen was climbing this solo, so there was no one else there with him to help him along the way. So we might never know what happened to him on that climb. What's also challenging is that when he was reported missing, there was a huge blizzard, so tracking him down was near impossible. While out looking for him, they did find 2 bodies. But to this day, they still haven't found Stephen. It's honestly a heartbreaking story, like poor Stephen and poor Olivia and her 2 sons. And at number 2, we have Catherine Campbell. In September of 2015, Officer Catherine Campbell went missing without a trace. She was first reported missing when she didn't arrive to work on September 14th. It was very out of character for her to not show up to work. Police then searched her apartment and they found her TV on, her alarm clock ringing, and her cats hungry looking for food. Eventually, police were able to track down Catherine's last movements. CCTV footage showed her at a bar with a man named Christopher Calvin Garner. At the bar, they were seen kissing and talking. They then left together at 3:40 in the morning. That was the last time Catherine was seen alive. CCTV footage of that night revealed Christopher rolling out a green bin down his street in bare feet. A while later, Catherine's body was found. The green bin Christopher was last seen with was found abandoned nearby, and he was caught for her murder. And in our number 1 spot, we have the river diving gone wrong. In January of 2018, a French policewoman went missing while taking part in a training exercise. So on that day, this woman and a bunch of other officers were at a river in Paris. They were doing diving exercises run by the Specialist River Police and firefighters in the French capital. That's when she suddenly disappeared. According to reports, she resurfaced from her dive and then quickly disappeared again. When this happened, colleagues went to look for her, but to no avail. There were 100 firefighters, 17 divers, 20 boats, and 2 helicopters out looking for her. Sadly, she has still never been found. Everyone is shocked at how fast she disappeared, and also how there's no signs of her. Starting off this countdown, we have Bison Dele. Bison Dele, formerly known as Brian Williams, was an NBA player who played center for Orlando Magic, Denver Nuggets, LA Clippers, Chicago Bulls, and Detroit Pistons. In 1997, he won the NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls. He retired early and went around traveling the world and sailing around. In 2002, he headed out on a ship with his girlfriend and older brother. Sadly, none of them would ever make it back. The captain, Dele, and his girlfriend disappeared and were never seen again. 2 weeks later, the boat was found in Tahiti. The only passenger was Dele's brother, Miles, who was dead. He had overdosed on insulin and slipped into a coma. So what happened on that ship? Well, there's no way we could possibly know, but police believe that Miles killed everyone on board, dumped their bodies into the ocean before overdosing. But this has never been confirmed. Moving on to number 9, we have Jim Sullivan. Jim Sullivan was a 35-year-old musician that disappeared on a solo road trip in 1975. He left Los Angeles and planned to go to Nashville in search of more work. It was said that he checked into La Mez Hotel in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, but he never even slept there. The next day he was spotted at a remote ranch. There, his car was found abandoned, containing money, his guitar, and clothes. He was last seen walking away from the ranch. That's the last time anyone ever saw Jim. Now, a day before he went missing, he called his wife, Barbara, and told her that he was alright. But Barbara was like, okay, yeah, I knew you were fine, so why are you calling? He responded with, "You wouldn't believe if I told you." She then said, "Jim, what's the matter? Is anything wrong?" And he said, "Forget it. Just forget I said anything. I'll call you from Nashville." So that's kind of a weird conversation, especially when the next day he went missing. So what was it that happened to Jim? Now, some believe that Jim was abducted by aliens or managed to make contact with them. I know it sounds crazy, but in 1969 he released an album titled UFO, so people believe maybe he was really into aliens and tried searching for them. Others believe he just wandered off on foot and got lost and then succumbed to the elements. Moving on to number 8, we have Sean Flynn. Sean Flynn was an American actor and photojournalist. He was probably best known for his coverage on the Vietnam War. He grew up following in his dad's, Errol Flynn's, footsteps by becoming an actor, but later changed professions and started working for Time magazine. In April of 1970, Flynn was sent to Cambodia on an assignment for Time magazine. However, while there, he disappeared, never to be heard from again. It's believed that Flynn and his colleague were kidnapped, held captive, and then executed. But no evidence was found showing that they were actually murdered. In March of 2010, remains were discovered and they were believed to belong to Flynn, but upon DNA testing, they discovered that this was not the case, meaning we might never know what really happened to him. In our 7th spot, we have Rico Harris. Rico Harris was a well-known basketball player for the Harlem Globetrotters. Sadly, his dependence on alcohol really got to him and he was forced to stop playing and to get a different job. Sadly, that didn't work out for him either, as he was later fired for drunkenness. After this, in 2014, he planned to live in Seattle with his long-distance girlfriend that lived there. So he had just visited his mom in LA and then headed to go see his girl in Seattle. Sadly, he would never make it. His car was later found abandoned at the side of the road in Sacramento. The car was out of gas and had a nearly dead battery. In his car was his backpack and his phone with a video of him from that night. Harris, however, was nowhere to be found. Now, days after his disappearance, people did say that they saw a giant person walking along State Route 16, which could have been Harris since he was 6'9". So it could be that his car broke down during the drive and he left on foot to go try and find help. But we don't know what happened after that. Moving on to number 6, we have Scott Smith. Scott Smith was a Canadian musician and bassist for the rock band Loverboy. In November of 2000, Smith and some of his friends went on a little sailing trip from Vancouver to Mexico. Sadly, while on his trip, a large wave swept him off of his boat. He was never seen again. Despite a number of searches conducted by US Coast Guards, his body has never been found, which they found to be quite odd. Did a rogue wave really sweep him out to sea? Or did something more sinister happen? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Joe PICHLER. Joe PICHLER was an American child actor known for being in movies such as Beethoven, The Fan, and Children on Their Birthdays. On January 5th, 2006, he went missing and hasn't been found since. On that day, he made a call to his friend at 4:15 p.m. That was the last time anyone has ever heard from him. On January 9th, his car was found near an intersection. All of his personal belongings were left in his car, except his wallet and car keys. Police found his apartment unlocked and his lights left on, which was very unusual of him. What's frustrating is that there is hardly any evidence in this case. Police really don't know what happened to Joe. Even with search dogs, they couldn't make much sense of his disappearance. So honestly, we probably will never know what happened. Moving on to number 4, we have Lord Lucan. This story is pretty crazy, so just brace yourself. Lord Lucan, or Richard John Bingham, was a very wealthy aristocrat and prominent member of the London social scene, mainly as a gambler. In 1974, he ended up killing his wife Veronica after she divorced him and got custody of the kids. The only problem being, he killed the wrong woman. I know, how could you mess that up? But apparently the room was dark and he thought it was his ex. But no, turns out it was the nanny. Anyways, after this happened, he basically fled to avoid being arrested and charged with murder. And it worked, because he was never found. But rumor has it that he ended up drowning himself from guilt over what he had done, and that his body is at the bottom of the New Haven harbor. In our third spot, we have Michael Rockefeller. Michael Clark Rockefeller was the 5th child of the 41st Vice President of the United States, Nelson Rockefeller. The fact that he was a Rockefeller made his disappearance that more bigger. People were shocked when he disappeared. In 1961, Michael was out boating when his boat overturned, and apparently he swam to shore to look for help. But that's the last we know of what happened to him. But it's believed that he was captured by members of a local tribe that killed and dismembered him. It's incredibly gruesome. Coming in at number 2, we have Harold Holt. Imagine a huge world leader goes missing, like Trump or Biden. That would have the whole country shook. Well, that's what happened to Australia. Harold Holt was the 17th Prime Minister of Australia. In December of 1967, the Prime Minister went out swimming at a deserted beach in Victoria, but he never made it back to shore. Apparently, the weather had been very bad that day. The waves were very high. When Holt went missing, the government felt ashamed. Like, how could they let that happen to their leader? Although his body was never found, in 2005 it was declared he had drowned. But of course, you got a handful of people that don't think this is the case and think something else happened to him. And in our number 1 spot, we have Patrick McDermott. Patrick McDermott is probably best known for being the boyfriend of Grease star Olivia Newton-John. He was also a cameraman, and that's how the two originally met. It was on a set of a commercial he was shooting. Anyways, McDermott disappeared in 2005 after setting off for a fishing trip. He was meant to return the next day, but when he didn't, the US Coast Guards were called in to help. The boat was found with all his personal belongings on it. Ultimately, they concluded that he had fallen off of his boat. But there's a huge belief that he actually faked his own death. He did this in order to avoid the debt he was in. It gets even stranger when apparently a private investigator spotted a man in Mexico matching a very similar description to Patrick. So maybe that's where he's been hiding out for all of these years. But still, this hasn't been confirmed. Starting off this countdown, we have Karen Denise Wells. In April of 1994, 23-year-old single mother Karen Denise Wells traveled alone to meet a friend in New Jersey. She rented a car and started her road trip. On April 12, 1994, Karen called her friend from a motel and told her that she was going to pick up dinner at McDonald's and then go to bed. That was the last time she was ever heard from. Her friend was planning to meet her at her hotel, but when she arrived at the motel just after midnight, Karen wasn't in her room. The next morning, her car was found abandoned and damaged at the side of the road. The passenger and driver doors were left wide open, the car was out of gas, and the battery was drained completely. In the car was her uneaten fries and some empty soda bottles. Her wallet and change purse were found outside of the car in a ditch. The strangest part of all, the amount of miles listed on the car's odometer did not match the distance that she traveled that day. There was an extra 700 miles unaccounted for. So what happened to her? We may never know, but this case is definitely suspicious. Making our way down the list at number 9, we have Everett Roos. Everett Roos was an American writer, artist, poet, and explorer. Before the age of 20, he had gone on numerous expeditions, like to the High Sierra, California coast, and deserts of the American Southwest. But on November of 1934, Everett disappeared while on a hiking trip. This trip was supposed to last 2 months, but after 3 months had gone by and Everett still didn't return home, his family began to worry. Upon searching for him, his donkey that he had been riding was found, but Everett's body was never found. It's thought that he may have fallen off of a cliff. but he was a seasoned hiker and had gone on numerous trips. The other theory is that he was murdered, but to this day we still don't know. Coming in at number 8, we have Norman Lee. Norman Lee was a 47-year-old, famous for his work as a Marvel comic book artist. In March of 2015, Lee and his wife went on a vacation to the Caribbean. On March 5th, 2015, Lee set out on a snorkeling excursion with his wife, but they got separated. She returned to shore, Lee didn't. He hasn't been located since. The Royal Caribbean Police Services searched for 2 days for Lee's body, but it was called off, claiming that the powerful currents in the area would make a recovery unlikely. Like, that's so sad. Imagine going on a trip of a lifetime with your lover, only to return home alone and heartbroken. I can't imagine how his poor wife felt. In our 7th spot, we have Tony Jones. This next case continues to haunt the people of Perth, Australia. In fact, it was a pretty famous case and received tons of media attention. So Anthony, or Tony Jones, was a 20-year-old man from Perth that set out on a 6-month backpacking trip around Australia. On November 3rd, he called his family and girlfriend and told them that he was going to hitchhike down to Mount Isa, where he was supposed to meet his brother Tim. The place he was going to get a ride along was the FLYNN Highway. Now, that highway has been dubbed the Highway of Death. That night, he set out and was never seen or heard from again. He never reached his brother. So his brother is adamant that he was picked up by a group of people that then killed him and disposed of his body. However, this case remains unsolved. Moving on to number 6, we have Judy Smith. In 1997, 50-year-old mother of 2 Judy Smith set out to Philadelphia to join her husband on a business trip. On April 10th, her husband was at a conference, so Judy went out by herself sightseeing. However, she never returned to their hotel that night, and her husband reported her missing. Judy went missing for 5 months before she was found. On September 7th, her body was found by hikers. Now, what's really strange is that her body was found over 960 kilometers away in North Carolina, and it was in a shallow grave, as if someone buried her there. Hence, police concluded that she was murdered. But we don't know why. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong because her very expensive wedding ring was still found on her. To make things stranger, Judy had her belongings in a red backpack, but a blue backpack was found with her. To this day, we don't know what truly happened to Judy. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Li Yinglei. Making this list made me realize that I never want to go on a cruise. Like seriously, if you get on board with a psychopath, they could easily murder you and then throw you overboard, and the ocean is so big your body probably would never be recovered. And then the killer gets away unapprehended. This may be what happened to 36-year-old mother of 2, Li Yinglei. In 2017, Li went on a Mediterranean cruise with her husband and 2 kids. But on February 20th, Li was nowhere to be found. Her phone, cards, and wallet were all left in her room. But her suitcase was missing. Now, her husband wasn't even concerned. In fact, he didn't even report her missing, which is why he then got arrested. But later he was released due to lack of evidence. He claimed that she just left the vacation early and returned home. Apparently this is something that she had done before. But I don't know if I believe him. The kids said that one evening their dad told them he was going out with their mother and would return later. But only he returned. Hello? He probably tossed her overboard along with her suitcase and made up the story that she just returned home. In our 4th spot, we have Charles and Catherine Romer. In April of 1980, Charles, age 73, and Catherine Romer, age 75, were headed back home from their yearly trip to Miami, Florida. On April 8th, they checked into the Holiday Inn hotel and dropped off their luggage before heading back out for dinner. That was the last time they were ever seen. Later, their car was found at the side of the road near a group of restaurants. Back at the hotel, none of their belongings were touched. There were no clues or leads as to what happened to them. They just mysteriously vanished. Some people say that they were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Other people think that they were a victim of foul play, since Charles was a wealthy oil executive. But we don't know for sure what happened. Moving on to number 3, we have Annette Mizener. I can imagine how excited Annette Mizener must have been when she found out that she won a cruise to the Mexican Riviera. So in December of 2004, Annette set out on a free cruise with her parents and teenage daughter. On December 4th, the last night of her 9-day cruise, Annette was singing karaoke with her daughter and then hit the casino. That was the last time she was ever seen. The next morning, her family grew worried when she didn't show up to play a scheduled bingo game with them. Eventually, her purse was found on one of the ship's lower decks near a railing. This has led many to believe that she fell off or was pushed off. An extensive search was conducted by the Coast Guard and Navy, but nothing came of this. The frustrating part? A camera that would have been able to catch what happened that night was blocked by a map of the ship. So now no one knows what truly happened to her. In our second spot, we have Ryan Singleton. In 2013, Ryan Singleton vanished while traveling to Las Vegas. Apparently, he left in July and went to Hollywood for a weekend trip, but he never returned home. So Ryan rented a car to drive from LA to Las Vegas, but while driving back, this car broke down in Death Valley. What a scarily appropriate name. Apparently, Ryan was spotted by California Highway Patrol walking down the highway. He was then picked up and driven to a gas station. A friend then drove from LA to the gas station, but when he arrived, Ryan was nowhere to be found. Ryan was missing for 74 days until his body was found 2 miles from the gas station. But here's the thing, he was missing his eyes, heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys. That's really scary. Some say he was attacked by an animal, but that makes no sense. What animal only has an appetite for certain human organs? No, something more sinister happened to him. And in our number 1 spot, we have Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy Lynn Bradley was a 23-year-old American that disappeared while on a cruise with her mother, father, and younger brother. She was last seen in the morning of March 24th, 1998. Apparently, Amy spent that morning drinking and dancing with the musicians at the cruise ship's bar. It said that at 1 a.m. they parted ways, and apparently at 5:30 a.m. her dad saw her sleeping on their balcony. By 6 a.m. that same morning, Amy had disappeared and was never seen again. Now, this case is crazy. Over the years, numerous people have come forward claiming that they have seen Amy. The creepiest part is that in 2005, her family received an email containing a photo of a woman that looks like Amy. She was lying on a bed in her underwear. It's thought that maybe Amy was abducted and is now being trafficked.